Hello, and on behalf of MSD UK, I'd like to welcome you to this Power Talk session. Today we have Nnenna, who will be speaking to us about the Corporate Innovation Challenge in the post-COVID world. Nnenna Ilomechina is a Managing Director with Accenture Strategy. She leads the strategy team and portfolio for communications, media, and high technology clients in the UK. Her focus is on helping executive teams tackle cross-functional and industry strategic issues, from growth and innovation to operational efficiency in this era of massive disruption and convergence. Nnenna is also the executive sponsor for inclusion and diversity for the UKI strategy and consulting business. A very warm welcome to Nnenna Ilomechina. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Prina. Appreciate that. So good afternoon, everyone. So what does innovation and managing disruption for corporates look like in a post-COVID world versus pre-COVID? Is it really going to be any different? And what can we learn from our experiences over the last few months? This past weekend, I was doing my usual end of summer decluttering exercise, and I went a little bit deeper this time. It was necessary given that, as many of you, I'm sure, we've made our homes into our workplaces and offices, our classrooms, and our gyms. And as such, we've accumulated quite a lot. And therefore, a cleanse is required, right? And I've been doing my deep cleanse. And I went a little bit further this time, and I came across a set of photographs, physical photographs, that I had taken during my 2-year posting in the Middle East. And I remember that period in my life quite vividly, but funnily enough, I could not believe that I was actually not walking around with an iPhone. I could not believe that all of those photographs were taken with a digital camera. I'm also sure that I must have rewritten history in my head, because that was clearly the pre-iPhone period. At least it was the pre-proliferation of the iPhone, which accelerated the digital capture of our memories and experiences. And so my life in pictures and in photographs is basically broken up into 2 phases: the pre-iPhone and the post-iPhone phase. We now have a new watershed moment, except it's an even more profound moment, because our experiences will now be categorized as pre and post COVID-19. Similarly, for big corporations, they will also have this view of their businesses and their world. There will be a pre-2020 and a post-2020 view of the world and of innovation and of disruption. But disruption is not new, right? The internet is flooded with stories of disrupted corporations and failed innovation stories, successful innovation stories as well. And companies, though, who failed to properly understand and analyze consumer trends and innovate and adjust their business models to adapt to the new world, they struggled. My first direct experience in business restructuring was as far back as the early 2000s. There was this large furniture retailer called MFI that some of you may remember if you're as old as I am. The business, it was a British business, and the business had been branded an unimaginative, slow to respond to consumers' desire for contemporary styles and higher quality designs as reflected in trends of the consumer and trends in contemporary TV shows. But although the UK company was still the market leader, the strong market leader, rival groups such as IKEA and Argos had benefited from their sluggishness to respond. And as a result, the firm's market share fell from 11% to about 8% between 1995 and 1998. And then by 2005, I was working on their restructuring. But there was a business unit within that company that did survive and did do well through the restructuring. And that was a business unit called Howdens. Howdens was a small focused unit with a different business model, a very differentiated business model with a clear focus on the builder experience. And they remained very close and abreast with the UK real estate market and the exploding trends in buy-to-let and general property renovations. And Howdens never lost its core purpose, They remained extremely connected to the builder community needs, and they adapted at speed. And as a result, they remain successful today. Now, this was my first, but yet one of the several disruption-based restructurings from retail to technology that I continued to work on before I joined Accenture Strategy. And today I'm responsible, as Prina mentioned, for driving digital transformation strategies for our portfolio of clients, which often requires helping them to think differently about their transformation, infusing innovation and new business and operating models and partnerships that leverage core assets while challenging the business models. And I want to cover three main points in the next 25 minutes. Corporate innovation and the main barriers to innovation for corporates. So I'll talk a little bit about how they have typically approached innovation. And then I'll talk about what COVID-19 has done and how it has accelerated innovation under duress, if you like, and how their attitudes will have to change fundamentally as a result of the societal change that we're going through. But then I'll also bring it back and talk a little bit about how you as diverse thinkers and innovators can play a critical role in helping to amplify the urgent need for corporates to break down barriers and radically alter their direction of travel. Now, corporates talk a good game about innovation, but historically there have been some challenges and barriers. But in my 20 years advising companies, I've seen consistent themes and how they approach the topic of innovation and growth. They know they need to innovate, but they're not prepared. In a recent survey that we ran with our senior executives, 93% of them knew they would be disrupted, but 80% of them also knew that they were ill-prepared to deal with it. We developed a model to help organizations understand their particular stage of disruption and how they can pivot their mental models to react. We call it the Disruptability Index. And I think it is a helpful model to assess how companies in different stages of development innovate to avoid disruption. We tracked 18 different industries in our study with over 10,000 companies. And by and large, these industries and their companies fell into four main periods or categories of periods. There were four periods: durable, vulnerable, volatile, and viable. Industries in the period of what we call durability, they demonstrate broad resilience and they achieve consistent performance because disruptors still remain a distant threat for now. But instead of purely sustaining the status quo, this is the period where companies have a great opportunity to seek and experiment with new business ideas and partnerships. So think of durability companies as companies like the large German chemicals firm BASF, and they've set up venture capital arms and invested in startups and niche areas of interest. They progressively bolster and allocate innovation investment to be able to test and turn new ideas into commercial realities faster. Moving on to the vulnerability period, companies in this period, weaknesses in their industry are just beginning to appear, sometimes due to a lack of innovation or insufficient investment in innovation. But it is in this period where these companies can benefit from the continued presence of, or they benefit from a continued presence of high barriers to entry, which they rely on to fend off disruption. So this blind spot of having a high barrier to entry detracts them from perhaps a great opportunity to scale up new ideas and venture into new markets. Companies in this vulnerability period are companies such as automotive companies that are dealing with the sudden emergence, not so sudden anymore, of Uber that changes the game for the automotive companies. So companies like Toyota, for example, they worked with Accenture and a telecoms firm, KDDI, in Japan to be able to develop their own artificial intelligence taxi dispatch system. So they were partnering to do what they could not do alone. They were committed to scaling new ideas with ecosystem partners who can provide access to technologies and specialized or diverse talent. Moving on to the volatility phase or period for companies. These are companies where the industry strength has already started to become a weakness. So think about, and this is because large disruptors have already started to unlock new sources of value. Most companies have been focusing on pressing issues in the core business because they are under attack, like reducing cost. But what's much harder for them to do, because they're so focused on the core business and reducing costs, what's much harder for them is redirecting investment capacity to grow new businesses. So think about retailers, for example. They're in the volatility phase, such as Walmart, for example. They try to innovate from within and establish specialized entities such as innovation labs or digital factories in order to bring meaningful innovation into their established business. And they need to do this more with partners. So think about the proposed partnership just recently in the press, potentially between Walmart and Microsoft to acquire TikTok in the US, to be able to drive their digital agenda further and capture the younger consumers and leverage the platforms of data and social media advertising capabilities. In the viability period, these are embryonic and reborn industries, and they already sustain high rates of innovation, and they enjoy short-lived competitive advantage as new disruptors are constantly emerging. So think about our digital platforms and digital-born native businesses such as Facebook, Google, Microsoft. Here, the opportunity lies not only in growing the core business by offering new products and constantly offering new products in existing markets, but also in expanding their footprint of existing products into new geographies. Companies in this viability phase, they embrace new technologies and develop potentially disruptive ideas inside and outside of their current industry. I like the way Satya Nadella notes that when unmet customer needs and technology at the right moment for maturity meet, then magic really happens, and they take advantage of that. 71% of the companies in the 10,000 companies that we analyze in our Disruptability Index, they fall into the vulnerable and volatile categories, 71%. So these are retailers, consumer goods and services businesses, banking, industrial equipment, automotive, travel. They all fall into these categories of vulnerable and volatile businesses. They all use a combination of methods to innovate and drive growth, most of which you may already be familiar with, such as R&D labs and venture capital accelerators, open innovation, playgrounds, and partnering with startups. But the companies in this vulnerable and volatile stage also tend to rely mostly on these partnerships because they're wary of what's on the horizon. And I've given positive examples, but when we analyzed the different models of innovation that these companies are taking at different points in their journey, we thought we might find different reasons for why some of them failed. But why they failed fell into three main buckets fundamentally: the business models, the strategy, and the culture. See, business models are typically optimized for the core of the business and based on a very fixed mental model. Over time, the incumbent companies, they've built up a reservoir of solid assets and processes and routines, and unsurprisingly, they lean on those when responding to disruption rather than staking out new terrain. And this leads them down familiar paths. They double down on efficiency and they get quite defensive. These valuable models have been structured to be efficient and controllable in a more predictable and less transparent world. That's a different world from the one that we live in today. They're baked in orthodoxies, they're built on certainty, from how they procure goods and services, raw materials, to how they service their customers. And this certainty and efficiency sometimes kills new stuff. They typically have long cycle times and processes and inflexible architectures and measures. The corporate DNA, therefore, has a tendency to kill innovation. And the culture is set to be risk averse. And it takes a very brave board to disrupt, as the entire business model and mental model rather is set up for what they do today, not for what they will do in the future. And understanding this opens up huge opportunity for startups to approach these corporates in a very certain way. think about some of the ideas that I spoke about, but does it make sense for Walmart to acquire TikTok? I can imagine some people thinking about that. But look at how Kodak killed digital photography, even though they came up with the idea in the first place. We've seen many a great idea killed in the boardroom because of incompatible measures of success. Think about their strategic focus. There's a question here about either being too close to the core of their business or being too far away from the core of their business. I once witnessed a car auction company that had a great platform that they attempted to then become a technology provider to other partners in their ecosystem without partnering with a technology firm to do that. Given how far away technology services was from their core auction services, this pivot almost brought down the business because they didn't necessarily partner with a technology firm to be able to do that. But at the same time, if you stay too close to the core of your business, this is just continuous improvement, and it does not necessarily make the companies resilient against disruption. But then think about culture and the experience or the inexperience of some of these companies in entrepreneurial ventures. Driving innovation is, as many of you will know, it's not so much about only the technology and the rigor, but really about the people. If you don't have the right people with the right skills and the right growth and always learning mindsets, then the efforts will also fall short. But now we're at this watershed moment that I spoke about, where attitudes and strategies post-COVID will be fundamentally altered from the pre-COVID incarnations. The scale and the scope of the pandemic that we are in the middle of is creating, yes, significant economic challenges, but it has also forced businesses to accelerate their creativity and flexibility, otherwise known as innovative thinking under duress. We don't know where the end of this challenging period will be. We see the economic implications. There may be another wave. We know the impact will continue to be significant. And every organization has been and will be impacted across products, services, people, and their organization models. It has clearly tested the corporation's ability or lack thereof to react. It's tested them. It has forced streamlining of processes and decision-making and cost structures. It has accelerated creative thinking on partnering and collaboration. Entirely new partnerships and innovation shortcuts have formed during this period, and companies that have a clear purpose, we have seen, have fared better. So for example, Detox Kitchen, it's a London deli food delivery service. They teamed up with their wholesale supplier in a different way to redirect food supplies that were typically for the restaurants that were now closed, thus creating a healthy direct-to-consumer offering, different from what they had before, but also giving NHS staff and over 70s a discount in line with their purpose, but also reducing the wastage in the restaurant and pharma supply chain. We've also seen other purposeful collaborations, tough situations like that of the civil aerospace engineer maker Rolls-Royce, whose revenues from air transport significantly declined, but they rose to the ventilator challenge, collaborating across their supply chain with an accelerated response beyond the typical decision-making cycles because of the purpose and the urgent need of the situation. Others like Grab and At Your Gate have seized the moment and solved a real urgent business issue for airports and food and beverage companies within airports to partner and provide a much safer digital-based dining experience at airports. These different approaches have broken down traditional barriers and challenged long-held notions of competitors, so that competitors have been combining capabilities across the corporations to solve critical challenges. And companies that have maintained and built consumer trust during this period will win. Even before the pandemic, 76% of CEOs we spoke to and we surveyed, they said trust will be critical to their business competitiveness in the next 5 years. And that was even before COVID really hit. Amazon, over this period, has clearly demonstrated the reliability of their model, and as a result, they posted record sales in the second quarter of 2020. But bear in mind also that, based on some Accenture research, in the UK, we found that 67% of consumers intend to spend more with businesses that treated their customers well during the pandemic. Additionally, consider the orthodoxies that we held about what could and could not be done remotely, flexibly, and securely, leveraging cloud technologies. Remote call centers using cloud remote center solutions were set up in days rather than months. Calls were rerouted with security and algorithms to the right agents in their homes like magic. We've seen speed to action, sudden disappearance of the red tape and convoluted approvals. Our clients are now willing to cut red tape of a big corporate to enable fast responses in a very entrepreneurial way. So we're seeing the beginnings of a cultural transformation where all of a sudden, for example, premises-based workforce move to home-based flexible workforce, and agents have to start behaving differently, being ready to take on new processes, take them on fast, and cope with real-time adjustments to processes as they test them out. Actually, our clients are telling us that the agents have been very willing to trade off certainty about how arrangements will work for the positives of working from home and flexible hours. And all of this means a more entrepreneurial, autonomous workforce needing new digital skills, but also having a more independent mindset. And there are direct diversity implications as well, with new opportunities for people with disabilities, people with caring responsibilities who couldn't turn up for a fixed 12-hour shift on campus. So it's a cultural change in the making, and it brings large corporations closer to flexible entrepreneurial startups in terms of their cultural alignment. And not only have businesses learned so much over the last few months about health and flexible working and digital capabilities, but they've also learned about societal injustices. The societal change has awoken a real consideration for fellow humans. The end of sort of turning a blind eye, and we now have to care more about each other and our employees. Purposeful and responsible organizations are rising to the top because with increased transparency, customers now know more about the businesses that serve them, and they can demand more from the businesses that serve them. So we've observed 3 key changes in behaviors of successful innovators, which will impact the way they innovate. And those companies that embody these new strategies will survive. So, firstly, purpose and profit, doing good, improved responsible business while making a profit. For example, think about the impact on the media industry over the last few months. It's ever more important that their purpose remains true to providing reliable information. Organizations have been judged on their response during this time, and that judgment will far outlast the virus itself. But while purpose will be very important, we will also be thinking about how to define new types of purposeful value while making a profit, the profit required to survive and thrive. So expect to continue to see unlikely collaboration to be able to solve these critical problems and do good for society. Secondly, digital is no longer an option, it's an imperative to survival. I mean, how many companies have you heard say that they wish they'd been more digital to enable a swifter response? And with the increased digital transactions that we're seeing and the behavioral data available, and with the cashless society that has increased overnight, we also need to place emphasis even more so on trust along with this digital trend. In many industries, the data from increased digital consumption and location tracking will drive personalization to a new level, inform production, and remove waste from the value chain, which will also enable the ability to test and learn at speed with reliable information and disrupt the orthodoxy that we previously held. Increasingly, location data for contact tracing, for example, will become more prevalent as our appetite for such, given the specific need for disease control. Thirdly, back to the people, culture, and diversity. Corporates have learned that in this new world and this new wave of virtual working, there's even more access to pools of talent that may previously not have been easily reachable, as we've discussed with the call centers, for example, but going completely virtual, thus giving way to a diverse set of partners to enable the much needed flexibility in the workforce and resilience, especially in their supply chains. This all provides really fertile ground for startups. So now we must think, how can ethnic minority-owned businesses bring a difference and a differentiated perspective to solving the same critical problems for the corporations, leveraging the three principles of purpose, digital trust, diversity with the current social movement? I think now is your time. Recently, in a brand survey that we did, 61% of people agree that it is important for brands to make clear what they're doing to help people and society beyond what they sell. And almost 41% in a recent survey said that knowing a company embraces diversity is now an essential factor in whether they will buy their products. We hope this prevails. The time is now to lead your corporate partners to do so. So think about how their corporate purpose and values are evolving, doing good and doing better for all of society, shining your difference and using it, not hiding it, because your way of thinking is different, which is why you're valuable, but also having a clear focus on the urgent business problem that you're solving for. Being clear about the value and the data and information that is widely available, using that data to amplify your value, but also to challenge the orthodoxies, challenge them, boldly. Our mental models are changing, and creating unlikely partnerships is the way forward. So use this moment to exploit orthodoxies within the organizations. And remember that the value you bring is broader than your product or your service. So think about how you can help in that cultural transformation. As always, remain ambitious, think big, but understand the core capabilities and the challenges that corporates face. You need to act fast, and also think about Albert Einstein's famous mantra, which is the significant problems that we're facing today cannot be solved with the same form of thinking that created them in the first place. So we need to unleash that full force of diverse thinking. And this should give us and your partners continued drive for thoughtful partnering, because the companies that embrace this way of thinking will be the ones that survive the new wave of volatility that is sure to continue to prevail. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nnenna, for that very insightful talk there on how corporate cultures have and still are adapting to the post-COVID world to accelerate innovation. Finally, on behalf of MSD UK, a very, very big thank you to you, Nnenna, for being part of this summit today. The next Power Talk will be starting at 1 p.m. by speaker Rina Sand on generating revenue from your IP assets. Please enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.